As humans, there are many things we do enjoy, but two of those things we especially love to do is we love water. Also, we love to explore the unknown, whether you're a Viking going to Greenland for a laugh, or a baby trying to eat a crab at the beach. Well, being honest, that might not make too much sense, but what does make sense is our absolute love for the ocean. As I mean, we are surrounded by the stuff, and especially we love all the funny little creatures that live inside of them, like blobfishes that probably look like they'd be called Steve, or a massive shark that's the size of about two Peter Crouches. So it was no wonder we started to design things to help us actually dive deep into these oceans and seas, and also to help clean up yesterday's prime bottle from some spotty teenager. Diving has been a pastime for bloody ages. Even as thick cavemen we loved our water, and were often known to be quite decent at DIY as well, as we would create our own snorkels out of hollowed out reeds and bamboo shoots by using simple stone tools. The trend also continued into the classic age with Romans and Greeks, as they were having a great time foraging for things like food and also bum sponges. Although snorkels were good because they actually allowed you to breathe at the surface of the water, it wasn't very good at letting you go quite deep because of this little problem called drowning. This is where our friend Aristotle comes in, because in 320 BC he figured out if you turned a cauldron upside down and put it underwater, the air actually stays to the top of the cauldron, and this is a thing called hydrostatic pressure, which in human talk basically means the water traps the air at the top of the cauldron, giving it nowhere to escape to, which means you can actually breathe underwater. The first time this technology is actually recorded to have been used is during the 4th century, during the reign of Alexander the Great, when he used it in his siege of a castle called Tyre. However, this could actually in fact be a lie, because according to the legend, the diving bell that Alexander the Great used was made out of glass, which is quite ironic because he was literally throwing stones from a glass house. Sorry, but just a quick message, can you please like and subscribe, and also follow me on Spotify if you'd rather listen to these episodes under the name of Deep Dive Designs. Thank you, much love, bye. After the siege of Tyre, which I said before might not have even been true, it seemed like the technology stayed pretty dormant, but the earliest recording we have of the diving bell actually being in use was in 1535, when it was found that 2 Roman ships were found at the bottom of a lake in Lazio, Italy. Fishermen kept complaining about the fact their nets kept getting caught on some pretty old bits of wood, which then led to a man called William of Lorraine, who was maybe Frenchman, maybe Italian, we don't really know, attempting one of the first ever salvaging missions, as we are seriously crap at not dumping things in the water. The way he was going to achieve this mission was by creating one of the first ever diving equipment. It was essentially a diving bell but for your head. So what he did in the design was he designed a barrel to perfectly fit over his head and shoulders, and this would also include a crystal viewing window that would be made waterproof by using a type of sticky petroleum glue known as pitch and tallow. William would be kept in the contraption by some harnesses that would go through his legs and attach to the bottom of the contraption. The barrel had winches at the top of it, so it allowed William to be dragged up to the surface just in case he was to, die. Obviously, wetsuits wouldn't have been invented for a few hundred years, so William would actually have to brave this in his birthday suit. Although in theory his design is actually completely functionable, the problem is our knowledge of diving was pretty primitive at the time, so this led to William actually having quite a bad day at work. He was lowered down a bit too quickly, so his head hadn't had the chance to equalise the pressure from the water, so his eardrums actually ended up rupturing, causing him to bleed quite profusely out of his nose and his mouth. But somehow his day got even worse after that, because not only was he absolutely freezing, he also brought some bread and cheese with him just in case he got a bit peckish, and I guess the fish were pretty hungry too, as William later explained that the fish started to nibble on little William. So after only half an hour, William had enough, or he got what he wanted in the end. After it's fair to say quite a disastrous first attempt, his second attempt was actually quite successful, mainly because the water pressure wasn't an issue as he had already ruptured his eardrums. And in the end he actually managed to rescue the 2 Roman ships, which actually turned out to be Caligula's orgy ship. Although William's mission actually had nothing to do with the military, and wasn't even that successful to be fair, he was still sworn to secrecy by the Venetian government. What also is strange is this isn't the first time diving technology has been suppressed. Although William of Lorraine is the first person to use a type of diving suit, he wasn't actually the first person to have a crack at designing one. It was actually a little known Italian man named Leonardo da Vinci who was up to his old tricks again whilst he was living in Venice. They were having a bit of jip from the Ottoman Empire, and the floating city was actually under siege by them. So it was up to Leonardo da Vinci to come up with a solution. And that solution was the invention of the diving suit. And what was also included in that was a breathing apparatus that would have two hoses attached to a mask so the user could be breathing underwater. However, similarly to his other projects, he wasn't too keen on actually making the thing, which is quite typical of the guy, especially as he wanted to keep the technology a secret because he believed the technology would be used and abused by the evil nature of men. Which, I mean, he does have a point. We do have quite a horrible reputation of being quite grim to each other. And also, Leonardo da Vinci thought we'd pick up underwater assassinations as a new hobby. Therefore, because Leonardo da Vinci was being such a teacher's pet, it wasn't actually until 1750 when the first diving suit was actually invented. And this was designed by a man called John Lethbridge. Now, John Lethbridge, he was born in Cornwall, Devon in 1675. His early life is actually relatively unknown, but what we do know about the guy is he was probably a bit strapped for cash because he decided to have 17 kids. So during this time, there were many shipwrecks as foreign trade was flourishing, especially from the Americas, as Pizarro and Costa decided that the Incas and Aztecs didn't want their possessions anymore. So seeing an opportunity to wrest some gold and silver for a bit of cash, John Lethbridge invented the diving machine in 1715. It was actually essentially just a barrel. John would be laying down on the contraption so the glass would actually be within his eye line. A main concern of John's was actually making sure the device could actually withstand the pressure from the ocean, as he might die, and this is probably not that ideal. So to kind of cope with this, John ended up adding some metal hoops onto the inside of the contraption to kind of withstand that pressure. The barrel also included some armholes for John as well, so he could tinker around in the ocean. A main problem with John's device though, it only held around about 32 minutes of air in it. So it would actually have to be lifted up to the surface and be filled with air from bellows. Also, another problem with the device is that it could only go down to about 18 to 22 feet in the ocean. So I guess it wasn't that great in the end because, I mean, the River Thames actually is 50 foot deep. So it does give the device quite a lot of room for improvement. During the same year, a Frenchman actually thought diving was actually quite interesting, and I think it'd be nice to be able to stay down there for longer than 30 minutes. He wanted to design a way you could actually stay underwater for longer, and this led to him developing a metal helmet with two hoses coming out of it. One hose was used for fresh air and the other hose was used for used air. John did actually become very rich from this, but unfortunately for him, it was decided that a metal helmet was a lot nicer than just a massive barrel that was only big enough for John. In 1819, a guy named Augustus Siebe was a British-German engineer who designed an airtight copper and leather diving suit. However, Siebe was very revolutionary as he believed in designing each component separately rather than a policy of buy the helmet and don't worry about the rest. This new way of thinking of design by Augustus Siebe actually was very helpful in escalating the progress in the developments of the diving suit. In 1839, Augustus Siebe actually managed to finish his iconic diving helmet, and this helmet was actually the first of its kind as it finally allowed you to have full movement, as previous designs actually had water sipping into the helmet if you were at a slight angle. This is achieved by how the helmet actually attaches to the rest of the wetsuit, because basically how the helmet actually attaches is it has 12 screws on the breast of the helmet, and these almost act as wing nuts. Having the leather in between two brass plates and then tightening it. This allows you to actually go down to 120 feet underwater, although you probably won't be able to breathe because there's no way for the CO2 to get ventilated. To add to the wetsuit, later on there was actually an air reservoir designed to be attached to the belt of the diving suit, and also a little door at the front of the helmet so you can enjoy a cheeky little cup of coffee after your dive, as I was pretty freezing. And talking about freezing, the suit was actually used during the disastrous Erebus and Terror expedition in 1845, and if you don't know what this expedition was, it was basically a British expedition to try try and find the Northwest Passage above Canada. The diving suit was really useful in repairing the ship and taking the packed ice out of the ship propeller. However, it wasn't that useful in the end, as the ship got stuck in the ice and everyone died. Augustus Siebe's diving suit was actually quite momentous, as it was the stepping stone in creating the first ever spacesuits, as they were designed to withstand extreme atmospheres like the depths of the ocean, outer space, and a lad's weekend in Zante. Many designers were inspired by this, and two of those designers, called Alphonse and one called Theodore, created what I like to call the scary robot suit, and I can only really describe it as the Michelin Man's medieval ancestor. The official name of it, the suit, is actually the Carbonoli, but it just does not look like that. That sounds like more it would be some sort of pasta, where this is just something from your nightmares. And the suit is majoritarily made out of steel, rubber and glass. However, there was one main issue with it, and that was the fact it just didn't work, mainly because of the pressure of the ocean being so high that actually the water ended up gushing into the suit, basically killing the person inside if they were to use it, which eventually led to the diving suits becoming more robot and a lot less human. So it's official, humans have been classed as completely crap compared to robots in most things, to be fair, but especially in deep sea diving, as we are quite inconvenienced by the fact we actually need to breathe. But while robots were going deeper in the sea than us humans, we are conquering the art of breathing without a massive hose attached to our face. A major concern, especially for the Royal Navy, was the vulnerability of the hose. If the hose got damaged, the change in pressure can actually cause serious harm to the person and sometimes even life-threatening injuries. So in 1878, Henry Fluis developed the closed circulation breathing system, which contains two core oxygen supplies, one that's used to help equalize the pressure by lowering the pressure particle of oxygen that you breathe in. It almost acts as a lung, as it's also known as the rebreather. So with the new breather, alongside some new fancy shoes and some skin-tight neoprene, this turned divers from what used to be scary robot monsters into something cool and sexy. And finally, it wasn't even until the 1940s, when Germany went a bit mental for some reason, until the military actually took any notice of diving and created the most terrifying unit of them all, the frogmen. But it was actually short-lived, as the divers on their own weren't scary enough, and they were only really mainly tasked with disarming underwater sea mines, so the underwater assassinations never really happened, and the main uses of the divers were for underwater salvations and actually to observe marine biology. So, to conclude, Da Vinci was right about the nature evil of men, because Primarch exists and being in there is actually a fate worse than death, but scuba diving, nah, I think it's alright, to be honest. Thanks so much for watching. Say if you enjoyed this, could you please like and subscribe, and also say if you'd rather listen to videos, you go check me out on Spotify under Deep Dive Designs.